Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's PC Gaming News Recap. We've got the next major expansion for World of Warcraft revealed this week. This brings us back to Azeroth, introducing a new playable race, a new class, dragon riding, a talent system revamp, and a whole lot more. There was also the preview for the Elder Scrolls Online's next big update, where we got a showcase of new playable areas, events, and a brand new card game. On top of that, there's the news that TERA is going to be soon shut down. There was an expansion for Outriders happening, the end to the Bethesda launcher, and a whole lot more. As usual, lots going on this week in the world of PC gaming, and we're going to get into all of it right after a word from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with what a VPN is. In case not, though, it basically reroutes your internet activity, helping with privacy by shielding your IP and encrypting your traffic. In the world of gaming, it has plenty of other useful benefits though, like letting you access games not available in your country by changing your virtual location. So any games with geo-restricted servers, location-restricted servers, for example. It also helps to avoid DDoS attacks if you play any other angry gamers, and it can help block many malware-ridden websites. Now, personally, I've been using NordVPN to gain access and play some of the upcoming MMOs that are not yet released in the Western markets. Other features of NordVPN include the fact that it's easy to use. You can connect with one click. They even have an auto connect for 0 clicks. There are over 5,400 servers in 60 countries, giving you plenty to choose from, and it's available and has support on 6 different devices. So to try NordVPN for yourself, you can head on over to nordvpn.com/forcegaming and get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month at a huge discount. It is risk-free as well with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Once again, that is nordvpn.com/forcegaming. And now let's get back to the video. Okay, so let's kick things off with the new World of Warcraft expansion. This is called Dragonflight. It brings us to the home of the dragons, Dragon Isles, where we're going to be leveling up to the new max of 70, getting new dungeons, raids, and gear, of course. In addition, though, to a bunch of brand new features and content. There's a new playable race called Drakthir. These are draconic humanoids with both human and dragon forms, and actually also the only race that can play as the newest class, the Evoker. Evokers are a hero class. They wield magic from all 5 dragon flights. They wear mail armor and will have 2 available specs at launch. Devastation, a mid-range DPS spec that uses red and blue magic, things like bolt attacks, energy beams, and fire breathing in various forms. And then there's Preservation, the healer spec that uses green and bronze magic. It's got ground targeted AoE heals, these cone heals, and a wind buffet ability. But a new race and class isn't all that we're getting. There are some additional new systems and features, including a talent system revamp. They're going back to more traditional skill trees, similar to what the game originally used all those years ago. This time, though, they are of course updated to the modern classes and their abilities, and also split into 2 sections. So there's going to be a class tree with different types of class utility, and then a spec tree that focuses on performing whatever your role is, damage, tank, or healing. So talent trees will be opening up at level 10, we found out, and you will be getting points every level, and these will alternate between a class point and a spec point. Pretty interesting stuff here. They say that this encourages players to make different combinations, and they also say that you'll be able to easily and frequently swap these, and they're even going to have a save load feature where you can set up various templates. In terms of borrowed power, they have said that Dragonflight will not have any expansion-specific borrowed power. They're instead focused on long-term progression, so there's going to be nothing like Azerite or artifact power systems, for example. There will still be some sort of progression with the expansion. They just haven't given any specifics yet. There's also going to be a UI overhaul. This is the first big revamp in 18 years. Pretty much everything across the board will be updated for a cleaner and more modern look. A couple more things. There will be some profession changes. These will be getting updated. There's going to be a new quality system. Higher quality equals better results. Things like increased eye level for gear or potency for potions. There's also a new work order system. You can put up the materials for an item and have a crafter craft it, letting you gain access to crafted items without speaking or interacting with people directly, just utilizing the system. There's also going to be crafting tables for every profession added to the game, and new gear types with dedicated slots that will make you better, like increasing your skill level or proficiency. And then the final major new feature coming here is dragon riding. So this isn't just like new flying mounts. This is different from the flying as it exists in the game at the moment. New animations, new functionality, a more movement-focused system that adds a sense of physics, weight, gravity, and momentum with new screen effects. Looks very, very similar to how flying mounts work in Guild Wars 2. This comparison is being brought up a lot, and for very good reason. Definitely seems like they are mimicking, copying, if you want to say, yeah, they're copying a lot of what Guild Wars 2 does really well, and I think that's smart for good reason. I think more games should emulate what Guild Wars does with their mounts because it's a phenomenal system. Of course, there's going to be new zones in the expansion. They gave us an overview of these, from wild and untamed coastlines to wide open plains, forest full of massive redwood trees, and snow-capped mountains. Looks like we'll be running the gambit of some of these more traditional high fantasy setting locations. When is all this going to be playable? Well, we do have an alpha that is going to be starting up at some point in the near future, they say. There's been no date set though. You can register for this over on their website. My estimation would put this expansion coming out in 2023. Not this year though, because it was also announced during their event. The classic Wrath of the Lich King is coming in 2022, but they didn't even give a year for the new Dragonflight expansion. So 2023 at the earliest seems like a reasonable guess to me. All around, I think this new stuff looks pretty neat. I do wish that Drakthir Evoker, that race class mashup, wasn't so strict. It's a little annoying. I get why they're doing it. They're like, evokers use dragon magic, so they can only be the dragon race. But at the same time, why can't Drakthir at least be other classes as well? Like playing like a Drakthir warrior, for example, or a paladin. Like, those sound like cool. It looks like it would fit with the aesthetic. Speaking of the aesthetic, people are not happy with the look of the Drakthir race. I did make a video diving into everything with this new expansion into quite a bit more detail and giving a lot more fleshed out thoughts. I will keep that contained to that video because otherwise this will just be like a recap of that one. But it's a new WoW expansion, pretty cool. As I usually do, I will play this for a while, maybe a month or two. I'll probably try the new class, I'll gear up and check out the new end game stuff, maybe do a little bit of PvP, and then I'll put the game down for a couple of years until the next expansion comes out. That's the cycle that I'm on with WoW, and frankly, I'm fine with it being what it is. In other big MMO update news, we've got some new information and a preview of the High Isle chapter that's coming to Elder Scrolls Online. This is scheduled to launch about a month and a half from now. It'll be coming out on June the 6th. But last week, ZeniMax held a preview event where they showcased some of the new upcoming content. So of course, there's going to be new zones. They are the islands of High Isle, Ominos, and then a handful of smaller locations scattered all around this island cluster. New open world stuff, delves, public dungeons, world bosses, all of my favorite things. I've always loved exploring ESO's open world and doing this stuff. All about that will also be a bunch of standalone side quests. There's also these new world events called Fissures, very similar to Dolmens, except with a volcanic eruption theme. A new main story quest line, of course. One big new feature is this new in-game collectible card game called Tales of Tribute. There's also going to be new end-game content and a 12-player trial. There are new companions and various other updates and quality of life improvements. So I got the chance to go hands-on with this update. I made a video about this as well, like a week or so ago, going over my general experience and my thoughts. But if I were to wrap it up, I would say, hey, this is more ESO. It feels like it's kind of weird. Like, the volcanic events are a perfect example here. They are pretty much just dolmens. If you ever played ESO at launch or in the past 8 or so years, it's very much like that. It's just got a different skin. You fight back these waves of enemies. There will be a few elites mixed up there, and then it all culminates with a bigger boss that you have to fight. Except instead of being chains coming from the sky and smashing into the ground, it's just a volcanic eruption version of that. But functionally, it feels almost identical, really. It's ESO, and the card game, unfortunately, I really didn't find too interesting. At first, I was a little on the fence about it, but as I've had more time to think about it and check it out, I don't think I would play this unless it was absolutely mandatory for some other sort of progression. I don't know that I will even touch this system if they don't essentially force me to, as it being like a progression blocking kind of thing. I appreciate that they're trying something different. It just really didn't click with me. I just didn't like it as a card game, and I don't think I would really spend any time with it. I would rather just be playing the rest of ESO that I do like. And again, that's like the open world stuff and going into public dungeons and trying to solo huge packs of enemies and take on bosses. That's the stuff I like. I can't imagine wasting any time with the card game. But maybe the most damning thing of all about this update is I just don't find the whole theme and setting particularly inspired. I just don't really, it doesn't do much for me. Not nearly as much as like the previous updates that were themed after Skyrim and Morrowind. Was really interested in those and excited about those, but this High Isle location, it just kind of falls a little flat for me. If nothing else, me revisiting this game just reminded me that I really like playing ESO, even if it is just for short chunks of time, and I'll probably come back to the game, but I'm not jumping on purchasing High Isle. I might just come back and play ESO and not even pay attention to this and spend some more time in the other updates, or even just with the base game, quite frankly. In just about 2 months from now, the action combat MMO TERA will be shutting down for good. News came through this week from the game's Western publisher Gameforge, who said TERA's developers Bluehole have decided to cease work on TERA. After much consideration, the team in South Korea have come to the conclusion that they are no longer able to offer you the exciting and satisfying content you deserve. As the last remaining publisher of TERA, it is with a heavy heart that we must respect Bluehole's decision and will also have to shut down the game. It's interesting here with how Gameforge in their messaging seems like legitimately annoyed that this is happening. To me, the tone of what they've written really reads like, hey, this is Bluehole's fault. We would keep it going if it wasn't for them. In fact, they actually pretty much said as much later in the announcement, as they say, Gameforge has happily hosted a great community in TERA for almost 10 years now, and we would have happily served players even longer, but without the support of the developers, this is not feasible. It really seems like the game was making Gameforge enough money that they were fine with keeping it up and running, but without the actual game makers, the developers themselves, continuing to support TERA, they are also going to have to stop keeping it running. Now, in terms of when this is all going to happen, well, they say that TERA's servers will be switched off on the 30th of June 2022. They're going to be hosting some events between now and then, but yes, at that point, after nearly 10 long years, TERA will be closing. All of this just reminds me that I wish there was someone out there, a publisher or some company, some conglomerate, something that would just scoop up every MMO that was on life support and be able to keep their servers running. Obviously, they'd have to negotiate with the rights holders and something would have to happen. But outside of that, like, our best hope is really just private servers ran by the community if people want to keep playing these games. Now, it does look like there are a few options out there for TERA. There are private servers, community-run servers, for any of you who might be interested. But in general, this is just sad news, mostly on the game's preservation level. It doesn't really seem like it's going to affect very many people. Currently, judging by the Steam numbers, TERA has been averaging around 100 concurrent players at any given time. So not a ton of people are playing this game anymore, but it is still sad to see an MMO. And an MMO that in many ways was highly regarded. People talk very fondly of TERA. I've played a bit of TERA and I remember enjoying it. The combat was good. That is the thing that people say time and time again. So yeah, it's kind of sad to see it go, but I don't know. I mean, it's not like I was going to be playing TERA tomorrow or next week or next year, maybe ever again. But yeah, I do wish there was some way to keep these things going officially, that something could be figured out. I hope we get there at some point in the future, honestly. Speaking of low player numbers, Babylon's Fall launched last month with very little fanfare, despite being a brand new title from Bayonetta and Nier developer Platinum Games. My ultimate takeaway after 20 hours was it just wasn't particularly fun, and it did very little to keep me interested in playing. Combat was mediocre, enemy AI was just downright bad, and it had these fairly off-putting visual aesthetic that didn't really help matters much either. Now, the game did so poorly with critics that it is currently the second worst reviewed game so far this year, according to Metacritic. But despite the overwhelmingly negative reception, Babylon's Fall did have its fair share of reporters. I remember browsing various threads, the subreddit, YouTube, basically anywhere discussion of the game took place, and I did see plenty of comments claiming that the game was actually great. People just didn't get it, and that those people were still happily playing. Well, it seems about a month later, even those people have checked out. As of this week, the concurrent player count for Babylon's Fall is peaking around 120 players and dipping down to below 10 players in off hours. That is certainly way worse than Platinum and Square had hoped for, I would imagine. Now, they did claim last month that they had no plans to reduce the scale of development or stop support support for the game even with its poor launch, although at the time of that statement, they were still closer to like 1,000 concurrent peak players, and now they are way below that, so who knows if that still holds any weight today, given their current performance. Now, as a reminder, this was Platinum's first attempt at a live service title, which they have stated will be a focus of theirs going forward, but with just how badly Babylon's Fall has done, I'm going to be curious to see if those plans change. This next story was a really nice surprise for me this week. We got the announcement of Outriders Worldslayer expansion. We knew that they were supposed to be getting some sort of a big update this year, although up until just recently, things had been pretty quiet. Well, now we know Worldslayer will be adding a new campaign, new zones, new enemies, new loot, and several new progression and endgame systems. The new campaign will give us several new hours of story to play through. The anomaly from the original game has continued to evolve, and we now have a new big bad enemy to track and take down. With this, there will be new zones and enemy types. We'll be going through frozen tundras, swamps, and facing off against new factions of enemies. There will, of course, be new loot, brand new weapons, as well as new legendary armor sets, and a whole new system with that. There's the PAX class tree, which they say adds 2 new subclass branches for each of the base classes already in the game. That's actually really cool. The Ascension system is a new form of endgame progression to increase your stats and power. They mentioned that this is meant as a long-term goal that will be spread over hundreds of hours of playtime. Then there are these Apocalypse tiers and Apocalypse gear. So the Apocalypse tiers will replace the challenge tier system that gives a scaling difficulty for better rewards. And with that, they're also adding Apocalypse gear, and this adds a 3rd mod slot to the game, and there's going to be a bunch of new mods along with this. Now, this is really cool because the mixing and matching of mods is a big part of Outriders, and having an extra slot going from 2 to 3 is actually a massive jump and is going to open up so many different potential combinations. It's kind of a really cool thought. There will also be a new end game. They call it the true end game, some sort of a trial challenge system. Although this was only teased, there was absolutely no details given. Outriders Worldslayer expansion will be releasing not too long from now on June the 30th, and it will be priced at $40. If you don't have the base game yet, you can, they're selling a bundle for $60. I'm not surprised by this pricing necessarily. We knew it was going to cost money. I would have guessed $30, but I mean, it does sound like a pretty substantial update, so we'll see. There was some follow-up to the initial reveal as well. They gave us some more detail. They say that this whole expansion is built for both existing and new players. So the new campaign will pick up just after the end of the original. However, if you're a new player, you can start right away. They're going to offer a level 30 character boost, but you can also then, if you felt like it, go back and replay the base game without any issue. And when it comes to returning players, they will just basically pick up right where they left off. They mentioned that this whole thing was developed with long-term progression in mind. You will play through the campaign and then begin the endgame loot hunt, trying to push your Apocalypse and Ascension tiers higher and higher, and they will also have an improved system of searching for gear. I'll say I've really enjoyed playing Outriders, although I did max out fairly quickly. I felt like I kind of reached the end of the game after like 70 hours, which 70 hours is a lot of time, but in terms and compared to other loot games, it really isn't a lot of time. I mean, those are games that people expect to be able to put like hundreds, if not thousands of hours into. But with the base game of Outriders at 70, I was like done. I was at that point just farming the same relatively small mission over and over again to try to get like some slightly better drops maybe, but I had a full set. I was doing the hardest challenges in the game solo without much issue, so there really wasn't any reason to push forward. So I guess I'm interested to see like what they're talking about is cool, but what is that repeatable content going to be? It can't just be farming Eye of the Storm again. There's no way, right? So we'll have to see when we get further details. But regardless, I like Outriders generally speaking. I'm excited that they are continuing to support it, and I'll be interested to see how this expansion does. The expansion announcement didn't really get a lot of buzz though, which doesn't necessarily bode well. I don't know, we'll see. I think it's a fairly competent game, not without its issues, but maybe this expansion will really push it over the edge into something a bit better. Bit of a PSA here, if you hadn't heard yet, the Bethesda launcher is going away this year. Starting on April 27th, you'll be able to migrate your Bethesda library over to Steam, which you're going to want to do because the Bethesda launcher will be going offline for good. So the migration to Steam is going to include your game library inventory as well as your wallet, any currency you have in there. So don't worry, you won't lose anything from your Bethesda.net account. They do say that many games will also have their saves migrated automatically, although there will be a few games that require some manual transfers. They go on to say that you will have access to play their games on the Bethesda launcher up until May 11th. At that point, it will be shutting down for good, so they suggest starting the migration process as soon as possible. And again, that becomes available on April 27th. And then finally, they assure us that the Bethesda.net accounts will not be lost and are still accessible through their website and in-game. This move was almost certainly made due to Microsoft's acquisition of Bethesda last year. I really doubt they would be doing this otherwise. In general, as a consumer, I don't really see much value in a developer or publisher specific launcher. I do know why companies do it, of course, to try to avoid paying Valve 30% for every sale that's gone through Steam. I get that, but as a consumer, it's mostly just a nuisance, like having to deal with a launcher for every single game you play. There was a launcher for Bethesda games, a launcher for EA games, for Ubisoft games, for Blizzard games. I don't necessarily advocate that everything just moves to Steam. Competition is good. Dealing with all those launchers was just kind of a hassle, so I'm not necessarily too upset that Bethesda's launcher is going away. Now you know, though. Make sure you transfer your games if you haven't yet. And lastly, I just wanted to make mention of the teaser video for Starfield showcasing Vasco, an expeditionary robot, and one of the many companions that will be available in the game. This was just a nice reminder for me that, wow, yeah, Starfield is still launching this year. I keep forgetting, and then I'm reminded, and I get very excited. Obviously, we're still waiting to see some actual real gameplay. They've said as much themselves that this won't be happening until much closer to launch. And yeah, my anticipation is very, very high for Starfield. I really hope that they deliver, and like Skyrim, it becomes a game that I will revisit 10 years later, and I still happily boot up Skyrim and play it to this day. It's one of those things. So really hoping that they can nail it with Starfield. I know there's a lot of trepidation around Bethesda because of Fallout 76. It's not, not only does it stray from the Fallout franchise formula, but it's also was just riddled with microtransactions and battle passes and obviously all the bugs that it launched with. But by all accounts, the game has really turned around, and I know it has a fairly strong, dedicated player base to this day. So I am not completely without hope for Bethesda games at this point. And yeah, we'll see. This is a big task. Starfield will be a big task for them. And that does it for this week's episode of PC Gaming News Recap. That's not even the name of the show, but that's that's it for this week, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the content as always, and I'll see you in next week's recap, which will be coming out next week. Right. All right. See you later.